Welcome back to the Bitcoin Brothers Australia podcast. You are watching episode 10, double figures. And what a
creepers. How did you get to 10 already?
I know, it's extraordinary. And what an absolute privilege and honor it is for episode 10, our first double figures episode. And we have a Bitcoin brother. I mean, everyone that comes on the show is a Bitcoin brother, but this is an official brother of mine, my only official brother, and his name is Jonathan Cram. Welcome, Jono.
Thanks, mate. I don't understand how it's taken you 10 episodes. You've named the show Bitcoin Brothers, and it's taken you 10 episodes to actually get your brother on.
Do you know what? I thought this might come up. I did think not so early, but I thought you might mention this at some point. I did offer Jono to come on earlier in the show, and he said, "No, I don't know anything." That was true, wasn't it?
It is slightly true, but I mean, how much am I getting paid to be here right now, Josh?
Don't tell that to the viewers. But no, Jono, we're very excited that you could come on here today, and we've got some huge news. It's been an incredible week as always. We're going to dive into your journey. Jono was actually in the crypto market before I was. He was into a bit of, what were you into?
A few different coins, but
yeah. What was your main one?
Oh, there was Cardano. Cardano,
yeah.
But we'll get into that a bit more later on, I reckon.
Yeah, love it. So a bit of Bitcoin versus Cardano, some huge news, tweets of the week, everything that you need to know about Bitcoin, price action, what's happening at the moment. Let's get stuck into it. So, Jono, first big thing this week is that the USA held a digital assets summit, I should say, 2025 USA Digital Assets Summit, and Trump led with that America will be the undisputed Bitcoin superpower of the world.
That sounds pretty good.
That does sound pretty good. For a decentralized asset that everyone can be a part of, he wants America to basically hold the most and to run the world with Bitcoin.
Sounds good for Bitcoin.
It does sound very, very, very good for Bitcoin. Then the Trump advisor, Bo Hines, so he was giving an interview after. He was being asked a number of questions about the strategic reserve. So how are we going to, again, we spoke about this last week, the week before, so it's huge news. It is going to be, I think, reflected on in history as one of the biggest announcements and things to happen in terms of, from a president financially and the way that the money system is changing. The Trump advisor was being asked a lot of questions. So Bo Hines was his name. He is playing a big part in acquiring Bitcoin. And so they said, well, how, people want to know, is the USA actually going to be buying Bitcoin? And he said, of course we are. And they said, well, how much are they going to actually be purchasing? How much are the USA going to try and purchase? Do you know what he said?
How much?
He said, that's a silly question. He said, that's like asking, how much gold do you want? How much Bitcoin do we want? We want as much as possible.
Sounds pretty good. But have we actually heard the exact figure, or are they just sort of saying that it's going to be a lot?
Well, that's a good question. They don't know the exact figure because the strategy is that it's not going to pay the taxpayers anything. So it's not going to cost the taxpayers anything, I should say. And it is not going to make the USA go into more debt. So obviously we've spoken about this a lot. You would have heard it. It's a crazy amount of debt. You can't even fathom it in your mind. So no more debt, nothing to the taxpayers. We're going to find budget neutral ways. So they're exploring lots of different budget neutral ways. We'll dive into some of that again today. We did last week with gold and the costing of gold and what it used to be worth and what it is actually worth now. There is definitely some great ways they can buy Bitcoin without it costing the taxpayer. And the Trump advisor, Bo Hines, said, you know what? We want to get as much as possible. Very exciting. Bitcoin is now a commodity, Jono. It's not a security. So we're going to dive into this because there's been a few announcements this week. So Bo Hines actually said this before the SEC. So another thing that he said here, Bo Hines, he said, Bitcoin is a commodity. It's not a security. It has an incredible store of value. It is digital gold. That's what he said. He didn't even say it's like digital gold. He said it is digital gold. We are building a digital Fort Knox for the people of the USA, which is pretty incredible for someone involved in the presidency to be in the administration, working closely with them. That's the attitude now from the government. And then you look at the price action of Bitcoin and you just think, wow, again, I almost say it every week for the month of March, but boy, oh boy, time is running out. This thing is just coiling up and it's going to spring very soon, you would think.
I guess a Bitcoin being a commodity, not a security, as a definition by the SEC, is probably one of the biggest news to come out, even though it's only probably seen as a small statement. Because do you know the difference, Josh?
Well, it's a great point. Yeah, tell us. So the SEC have said, hey, Bitcoin is now a commodity. It's not a security. So yeah, what does that actually mean for people that wouldn't be sure?
Well, I guess a security is something such as shares, bonds, stuff you can invest in the investment market. It's obviously going to be regulated by someone. A commodity is something that's isn't really regulated. So something like gold, oil. It's not going to be, I guess it still can be taxed, but there's not really, I guess the implications is that as a commodity, it's still seen as sort of like a store of value like gold, as oil. So it's that storage of value that Bitcoin represents digitally. And as we know, crypto, people don't understand it. It's such an amazing technology. It's like the birth of the internet again that we're going through.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin, what makes it better than all the other coins, obviously, is that no one knows who made it. It's come out of nowhere, and it's probably had some funny beginnings in what it was used for. But like any new technology, it probably had different purposes at the time. But now people are going, "Wow, this is amazing." Don't want to get a bit off topic from your news, Josh.
Yeah.
But I heard an amazing thing because I didn't know what crypto was, One of the amazing things about crypto is that 50% of the land in all of the world is untitled. So we buy a house, we have a titled land. 50% of the world. So if I'm in a third world country, and let's say we're in the middle of a civil war, I'm living somewhere, it's my land, I go off for a year or two because there's war happening, I come back, someone's living in the house that I was living in. How can I prove that I used to own that? There's no way. But crypto, because crypto, when you have things such as smart contracts, it can't be manipulated. So you can use the technology that crypto is to show that you have titled land.
Yeah, wow, that's a fascinating point and a really good point. And I think that's something we'll dive in more with your journey as well. But definitely appreciate you sharing that, Jono, because it's incredible that like even the SEC now means that they can't be in control of Bitcoin, basically. Like they're saying, hey, we're not regulating Bitcoin because Bitcoin's not a security. It's a commodity.
I also think Bitcoin's so big now. It's bigger than the United States. It's like you can go to your local petrol station and there's now a Bitcoin ATM.
That's how cool is that?
So I think like you can't regulate it. That's why it's seen as like that oil, because it's just too big now. That's why I think it's not a security, it's a commodity, why it's seen now.
Yeah, and Michael Saylor gave a great little presentation on that. If you haven't seen it, get onto his X, and kind of a 30-minute presentation, but basically going through how like Bitcoin is the greatest commodity. So it's like not only is it a commodity, it's the commodity. And if you have a look at every single other commodity, there is lots of weaknesses with them. And he made this really interesting point, and I'm so glad you brought this up too, because he said if you had however much money you managed to acquire in your life, right? Whatever wealth you managed to acquire, you work really hard for every day, and you save up, and you have that, and then you're going to pass it on. Say you're going to pass it on to your family in 100 years. Right, so you've got to choose a commodity to put all your wealth into, and in 100 years' time, you're going to give that to your family. What commodity would you choose? And he's like, well, in the past, people might have thought, well, would you choose oil? Something like that. It was like, well, no, you're not going to choose oil, because if the price of oil goes up, what are they going to do? They're going to frack and frack and frack and keep going, and then it means that the price of oil will be driven back down. Like, if the price of gold gets too high, what are they going to do? They're just going to put all their resources into mining more gold. If the price of like whatever it is, right? There's only one thing that you can't, only one commodity that you can't kind of manipulate and control, and that's the commodity.
Well, what's that, Josh?
That is the perfect money. It is Bitcoin. So it's fascinating to hear him talk about it, because he's like, hey, like when you put it like that, you're like, hey, what would you want to put your wealth in to then give to your family in 100 years' time? Out of all the commodities, what would you choose? It's like, well, there's only one real choice.
Is it oil? Bitcoin. Okay. Yeah,
it is absolutely Bitcoin. So, yeah, really interesting discussions this week. And then in a different interview, So this is Bo Hines again. So he's going through the SEC. They're asking him questions. They've had this big kind of crypto summit, digital asset summit, I should say. And it was cool too because Trump finally started to distinguish between Bitcoin and crypto in the summit, which was very interesting as well. So, but in a different interview, he was also asked about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin that they already hold. So he said that they used to hold 400,000 Bitcoin. So the United States altogether used to hold 400,000 Bitcoin. They now only hold 200,000 Bitcoin, right? So they actually the previous government sold 200,000 Bitcoin. They sold it for close to $370 million, right? Not bad?
It's not bad. I'll take that much money, Josh.
Yeah, you'd be pretty happy with that. Well, if they didn't sell it and they held it, this is probably a great lesson for the partners of people who buy Bitcoin and they say, come on, sell and cash out. This is probably one of the best lessons right here. So the previous government sold the 200,000 Bitcoin. They sold it for 370 million. If they held that Bitcoin right now, it's worth 17 billion US dollars.
So how long ago did they purchase that Bitcoin, Josh?
Well, a lot of it was actually from like illegal enterprises, shall we say, Jono? So a lot of it was kind of seizures from criminals and illegal enterprises, and then they ended up selling it for 370 million. But if they held, that would be worth 17 billion today. So the lesson there and the news of the week from the Digital Summit and from the Strategic Reserve and from Bo Hines is hold your Bitcoin.
Yeah, it just sounds like it's just going to go up.
That's right. It has so far, and we think it will continue to. The next part of the news, the Metaplanet CEO. We spoke about him last week. It was kind of funny. He's been in the news a couple of weeks in a row. And I'll ask you this question, Jono, what you think after your research and things like that too. But he made the news last week because people were going through percentages. So how much Bitcoin should you own? What percentage of your net worth should be in Bitcoin? And we spoke about the different percentages, 1%, 2% for some companies, 10% for others. And then you start to jump to the big boys and they're like, hey, no, I got more than half my wealth in Bitcoin. One of the billionaires said, I think he had 70% of his wealth in Bitcoin. And then the Metaplanet CEO comes in and says, boys, what are you talking about? I got 100% of my wealth in Bitcoin. So that was kind of cool. I was interviewed there. But then, so he made the news again this week. So he said that there are many Asian countries now in talks to adopt Bitcoin, including Japan. So he said behind closed doors, there are many Asian countries now trying to figure out what can we do, what strategies can we put in place, who do we need to convince? Where can we get money from, basically, to add Bitcoin to their reserves? And this is the game theory we've been speaking about since episode 1, since episode 2. Like, game theory is coming, and I think it's coming this year. Like, I really do. I think this year, it's, we talk about price action, talk about news, but it appears the way that things are heading, that by the end of 2025, we sit here today at 84,000 US dollars a Bitcoin, that by the end of 2025, this is not financial advice, but if you're going to make a prediction based on the evidence, you're looking at at least 250,000 US dollars a Bitcoin at some time this year.
It's a lot per Bitcoin, Josh.
It is. So that was really interesting. And then Metaplanet were in the news again. So this was really, really recent. So this was this morning. So they announced that they have welcomed Eric Trump to their newly formed strategic board of advisors.
All right, so one of the Trumps is now in the company that's worth billions of dollars. It owns 100%, or the CEO owns 100% Bitcoin.
Correct. Yeah. So this is Eric Trump. So Donald Trump's son. He's done a lot of work in the crypto space. He actually he tweets about it quite a lot. Does Eric Trump, in terms of Bitcoin, of even Ethereum, of other digital assets. But yeah, he announced that he has joined the Metaplanet strategic board of advisors. So Eric stated that it's a great honor. He said, I'm all in for Bitcoin and I'm excited to continue to be a leading voice for this incredible financial revolution. How's that? The son of the president of the United States has joined the Metaplanet.
Do you reckon he owns a bit of Bitcoin, Josh?
How much? Yeah, I mean, it's so funny, isn't it? I reckon he owns a big truck load of Bitcoin.
The old saying, follow the money.
Yes, follow the money. Well, again, I actually spoke about it in I think it was episode 1 or 2, but when you see these guys that are in power and they're all like, you know, they're all purchasing Bitcoin. They're all talking about Bitcoin. They're kind of showing how Bitcoin can revolutionize the financial system, as a few people have started to learn. And I said, like, with anything in life, just because like rich guys are telling you to buy it, doesn't mean you should buy it, right? It means that you should like definitely question, definitely look into. But when you see something like the properties that Bitcoin has, the fundamentals of Bitcoin, and then you see this news every week, like every week, there's just more and more people, the adoption's growing, more things are happening in Bitcoin. When you see that, that's when it's like, okay, I've got these fundamentals of this awesome technology it is hard to grasp and understand, but it's incredible. Like, however you look at it, it's incredible. And then you have these like unbelievable people in power who are like, oh yeah, I actually understand that this is incredible, and I'm going to put all my net worth into this thing. Well, I mean, you can draw your own conclusions and make your own decisions, but every week it's incredible.
That's unreal. I mean, like, even just when people say, I don't understand the way Bitcoin works, well, then I say, tell me how the internet works. Tell me how your computer works, how your TV works, how your car works. Like, majority of us, unless we're in those fields, will have no idea.
100%. That's such a good point. I saw two things. I saw someone talk about this exact point as well, and they were talking about like emails. They're like, oh, tell me how, you know, you send an email and then it ends up in someone else's inbox. Like, tell me the code for that. Tell me how that happens. And it's like, well, I can't because I don't know how it works.
Goes up to the satellite and then beams down. So it's like, I mean, that's as much tech savvy as I get. But
yeah, so but yeah, it's a great point. It's like, well, just because you don't know specifically in the fundamentals of like how is Bitcoin created? What is Bitcoin? How does it work?
I think it's not about how the technology is. It's what's the use of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Is this going to be used a lot in the future?
Yeah.
And I think crypto as this is my opinion. I know you're doing the news, get off topic.
No, it's
but
good.
my opinion is that Bitcoin is a storage of value. It's like gold. So it was the first cryptocurrency ever made. It's the only one without, I mean, there might be some out there without CEOs or companies, but it's the main one. It's the first guy off the block. Yeah. And it's hard to chase down the first one.
It is because it's been tested. It's been tested through every kind of trial. So every hacker's tried to crack the Bitcoin network. It's tried to, you know, it's every kind of thing that could have possibly gone wrong it's been tested, it's been tried, it's true, it's worked, it's fine, it's come through anything that could have gone wrong. Here it is, you know, 16 years later, and it's just becoming this huge thing.
I mean, it's not a security now, it's a commodity, Josh.
Well, and that's, exactly right. That's a great point as well. Very, very great point. A little bit more news from the United States. So Senator Cynthia Lummis has tabled a bill for the US to purchase 1 million Bitcoin over the next 5 years. So
what's that in dollars, Josh?
Oh yeah.
How many billions?
Yeah, that's a lot of billions. What's interesting about this is in history before, there has been a time where the president has made an executive order, like he has, to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve and to acquire Bitcoin. So that's happened before in terms of an executive order has happened, and then through Congress, a law and bill has been passed. The reason this is really big news is because if this does pass, and this is like almost bipartisan, so there are people from the Republicans and the Democratic Party who support this, who understand technology and they understand the benefits that this could be have for the USA, regardless of what your political party is. So this is really interesting because even if this does pass, even if the Republicans lost the next election, this couldn't change. That's the biggest. This would never be able to change because it would be enshrined into law, right? Unless somehow, I don't know, Congress and the House and the Senate, but once this goes through, it you almost can't be undone. So this is bigger than an executive order. This is wowee.
If it gets through.
Yeah, if it gets through. That's right. And she's pretty confident. So you talk to her about it, and she's pretty confident.
But don't the Republicans, aren't they the House of Rep and the Senate?
Yes, great question. So they have both at the moment, but I think for something like this, you need a 2/3 majority.
Okay.
Yeah, from my understanding. Could be wrong. not an expert on politics, but from what I've seen, you need, or they need like, they might have 50 something and they need 60, or it's like it's like, it's not a guarantee, but yeah, 1 million over the next 5 years. They would purchase 200,000 a year. The Bitcoin would be held for a minimum of 20 years.
I mean, like you said on the podcast last week, 70% of Bitcoin investors are short term. So isn't that crazy to see a government go, oh, you need to hold it for a minimum of 20 years? Like,
yeah, that's the bill. Yeah.
I think, like, if that doesn't give you confidence that a government, as one of the largest economies in the world, is going to...
The largest.
The largest?
Probably, yeah.
One of the largest. Anyway, is saying, we're going to buy this, and we have to hold it for 20 years minimum. Yeah. Imagine if that got through. Imagine the confidence as someone that owns a little bit of Bitcoin that would give you. Yeah. It's just like...
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. So one of the main ways they would purchase is, we spoke about this last week, is to revalue the gold that they have. So the gold is currently valued at 11 billion on their balance sheets, on the American Treasury, on the balance sheets there, the USA. It's valued at 11 billion. The current market value, 675 billion. Little bit of a gap there, Jono.
Is it? So this is Fort Knox, right? Where they took all the gold and they've just left it there and they haven't done anything about it for 50 years.
Yeah, and you know what I'm thinking? That because we spoke about this a few weeks ago, I'm thinking that even if the gold was gone, like, why would they tell anyone?
Yeah, why would you? I mean...
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I mean, but aren't normally governments honest, Josh?
Yes, they have a history of being very honest there, Jono.
Yep.
How's that for a difference? So it was last valued in 1973, and the price has not changed since then, since that valuation. If they were to revalue it, the current market value is over $675 billion. Anyway, that's how they want to buy the gold. I mean, that's how they want to buy the Bitcoin. That's the main takeaway from this, is like, how are the USA going to be buying Bitcoin? Well, that's one really key way where they actually have heaps of money that they can use.
So they would be almost, I don't know, if my maths is correct, about $666 billion they could add to their balance sheet. It wouldn't cost the taxpayer, which then they could maybe put in the reserve.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So there's a possibility that could potentially happen.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and then the last thing, part of the bill, was like, states could still voluntarily establish their own Bitcoin reserve. So the bill also makes it law that all individuals have the right to hold, so no matter what state they're in. So states can still hold. All individuals have the right to hold Bitcoin. They have the right to transact in Bitcoin without federal interference.
Doesn't the federal government like getting taxes from people, though, Josh? How would there be no federal interference?
Well, it would be the law.
It's incredible. It doesn't normally the federal government, if you hold something and you sell it, go, give me like 30, 40, 50%.
Yeah, they do. They most of them, they do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We were talking about this before with the commodity versus security. There'll be arguments for people, hey, this is a great commodity. I know you still have to pay tax on gold and things, but like, why do you have to pay tax on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think that could be maybe depending on what government, don't want to get political, but what government's in at a time, maybe that might be something that they try and tax more later on as more and more people get it,
some governments have. Some governments around the world have definitely tried to up the taxation rate, if you like, on Bitcoin, because they don't want people to use it. But if it is a store of value, and then it also can be used as payments, like I did a little test run during the week, actually, a little Bitcoin Brothers Australia test run, transferred a little bit of Bitcoin from one cold wallet to a different cold wallet, just to see the time, the cost, and all those sorts of things. It happened within about 15, 20 minutes from one wallet to the other, which was not too bad considering the cost of about, 50 cents, I think it was, to transfer. So it's like, instead of bank to bank, and you can do that around the world. That's the incredible thing. So it's like, I could do that, in 10 to 15 minutes. I could send someone a stack of Bitcoin who's living in the USA, for example, or in the UK, or in the Middle East, or wherever they're living. And it cost me nothing. Like, it cost me like less than $1 Australian, less than an Australian dollar to transfer heaps of money or heaps of Bitcoin around the world. So that was pretty cool. It was a little experiment during the week. So
gee whiz.
Yeah, it was good
There
fun.
you go.
Good fun. That is an incredible news week of Bitcoin again.
Crazy.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for coming on today. We are thrilled to have, like we had a bit of a joke off the off the top, but thrilled to have our official brother on the show. Our not only our Bitcoin brother, but our real brother. I spoke about our journey a little bit in episode 1. So I spoke about just a little bit of what I remembered from our childhood and I guess how I felt I was raised in terms of who did I kind of, my influences in understanding money. And then I spoke about how did I actually get into Bitcoin and things like that. It'd be really interesting to hear your take on some of that in terms of what, your memories are, who you felt you related to more in understanding money and the way that you either saved or spent. And then obviously how you came into Bitcoin. So, Jono, tell us a little bit about your journey, mate.
Well, thanks, Josh. I mean, we had pretty similar upbringings, being my brother. So, I mean, if you go back to episode 1, you might hear about me. But I guess for me, growing up, I mean, money was very funny. Like, obviously, you've talked about Dad on the podcast before, and how Dad he sort of saw money as he didn't really care much about it. He had to have it. He used it to live off, but he never really saved. And
very fast and loose.
Yep, very fast and loose. Yeah, and I guess like Mum growing up, sort of for the first 5 years of my life, just had us two and worked really hard, and then obviously met our stepdad, and then they, I guess money was sort of, we didn't grow up poor, but we, shared a bunk bed together. We were still very well off because we had each other. But I guess for me, like Mum taught us, I had to buy my own phone when I was 16. That was my first phone. I was 15, 16. I just wasn't given a phone.
Yeah.
I had to work for it. And I think I had that work ethic up until maybe the age of 18, 19. Like, I think Mum was definitely my biggest influence.
Yeah. I spoke about that as well, just to pause you there. Because it was interesting that, like, from even, like, friends and different things like that, and you see where people are at, and, like, it's something that I look back on, and I hope that I can have that same thing for our kids. It's like, they see that value in, hey, you're not just given things just don't appear. And I think Mum did that really well in terms of, if you wanted your phone, you had to save up and you bought a phone. If you wanted a car, same thing. If you wanted credit to use on your phone back then, it wasn't a plan.
I grew up sort of, I think Dad's belief in money really came into me though. I think when I was looking back and I was reflecting on it, I was like, well, Dad, I remember saying like money, I remember thinking I don't really like money. I'm just like, money, you hear is the root of all evil, and, a lot of evil in the world is because of money. And I remember Dad, saying these things and sort of giving these little lectures growing up. And I think for me, money it was like freedom. So if you had a bit of money, you could do things. I didn't really see, it was a necessity. So like I always worked hard. I was always able to get jobs. Like I remember getting 3 job interviews in a day, and I got every single job. I was in the hospitality sector, working in sales, obviously worked at Footy Records together at the G. But money for me was always, I didn't see the value of it. And now it wasn't until I had my own kids, and I started getting more responsibility in my life when other people had to rely on me that I actually saw the importance of it. I mean, I think for me, it was the biggest turning point is a funny story sort of to reflect the way I viewed money. I'm a teacher, and so I studied teaching for 2 years straight after high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I was just like, oh, what's my brother doing? And so I only got into teaching because you were doing it.
That's so funny.
So I applied for a few teaching courses, got into one, did 2 years, did pretty well.
I think didn't you win an award for did pretty well. I'm sure you won an award for top of your whole uni course or something.
No, I don't want to, but maybe in my second year, but don't want to.
What was that called?
I graduated with honours, but that was the highest outstanding achievement award in my second year of uni. Yeah. But so I did work hard, and I don't want to boast or anything, but I mean, end of the day, I worked hard at that year. But I think I got to a stage in my life where I'm like, I don't know, this is what I want to do. What's life about? What's the purpose I don't want to get too philosophical, but I took a year off uni, and I was like, and I lived it up. I went out a lot. I enjoyed myself. Maybe, and I think it's okay to do that when you're that young and you don't have any responsibilities. So, as an example, one night I just went to the airport. It was early in the morning after a big night, and I just jumped on a plane to Perth. No clothes, nothing. Just had a backpack on my back.
You weren't wearing any clothes?
I was wearing clothes. I didn't have any clothes on me. So I got to the airport, bought a backpack, luggage. Bought a phone charger, and just jumped on to Perth and stayed over there for 4 or 5 months, and it was a pretty wild ride. And then I came back, still didn't know what I wanted to do. Took another year off uni, so I took 2 years altogether because that's the max I could do before having to reapply.
Yeah.
And then I did a stint up in the Northern Territory for a bit, and then when I came back, I met a girl at a club. I jumped out of a curtain and I scared her, and it was love at first sight for me. I saw this girl, and I just remember dancing with her, just thinking this is the love of my life, instantly, and I'd never experienced that feeling before. Not that. And I went on the first date with her a couple of days later, and I had $50 in my bank account. And so...
How old were you at the time?
It would have been 22.
22. So you're 22, and you got $50 to your name.
And I didn't think I'd have enough. So then I asked one of my best mates if I could borrow some money, and he had $100 in his bank account, and he lent me $20.
How old was he?
He would have been 21.
So funny. So we got a 22-year-old with $50 to his name, and then a 21-year-old with $100 to his name.
And so I had about it would have been $50 to $70 for our first date.
Yeah.
And we went out to this very nice restaurant.
Oh, here we go.
And
you didn't ask her to pay, did you?
No, I did a very good spill about equality and how we should be paying 50-50 and how no one should be paying 100%. Anyway, I think it worked. So I tapped my card, and it went through, and I was like, yes! and I got through the first date, and it was an awesome time. And then...
Did you celebrate in front of her?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But she didn't know what it was about. Like,
No.
I wasn't dumb enough to say, oh, there were $50 in my bank account. I don't think she would have stuck around. But, like, I think for me it wasn't till I met my partner.
Yeah.
And...
Fiance?
She's still my fiance, yep.
Yep. And mother of your children?
And mother of a few children that I've got at the moment. So, like, it wasn't until I met her that my life started to get more stability.
Yeah.
And it wasn't...
So you needed that purpose to be like... So it's like you feel like you had the kind of the upbringing and the learnings from mum. You had the fast and loose from dad.
Yeah.
And probably explored both.
Yeah.
And then,
100%.
And then when you had the purpose...
And
it
then,
was like, okay, well, what do I need to do now?
Well, it wasn't until I read The Barefoot Investor. That book really helped me. And I think as the last few years of especially the last 5 or so years of my life, as I've had kids, more as a lot of people, you have people relying on you, and so now you start to value money more, because without it, it makes life very difficult. We all need to pay bills, we all need food, and so now it's like, well, money is a bit more precious to me now. I'll spend occasionally what I have for good memories for my family, but I'm not going to go overboard. I'm going to have a budget, and I'm going to set things.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a good balance.
Yeah, and so, like, I love my fiance to death, and, and it wasn't, and I think I guess her and some of her family have really helped me to understand money and the value of it a bit more. And I guess that's my journey a little bit financially.
So thanks, Jono. So it's really interesting to hear like lots of your journey, and obviously that's awesome. Your partner's been a huge influence in having the kids as well. Certainly a big help on you. Kind of you've gone through that, that conservative to then as the young adult, the fast and loose, the wild ride. and then, meeting her, having kids, understanding a little bit more, and obviously getting help from them about, okay, how do I need to structure things here? What can I do to help myself in the future, help my family, that kind of thing. I think that's awesome. How then did you get into, I guess, crypto investing? How did you get into Bitcoin? What do you think about Bitcoin?
All right, so I guess how I got into investing and crypto is I have one of my best mates growing up from high school and primary school. He really got into Cardano, ADA. So it's called ADA when you buy it on crypto.
Yeah.
He for a couple of years, every single night, I started calling him the crypto god. And he said he studied all the coins, and he said, this coin has the best technology. In the future, this is probably the most likely to make money.
Okay. What year was that?
Would have been around 2019, I reckon, 2020.
Yeah.
Because he was married in 2021, so maybe 2020.
Oh, yeah, he said. So, 2017 it comes out. He starts getting into a couple years later. Yeah, nice.
It was... Yeah.
How much has it gone up since then?
I think it's gone back into the dollars. So when I first purchased it, I think it's about nearly the same level.
Okay, so since about 2019, so 6 years or so...
Let's say 4 or 5 years, it's probably gone back to its other highs. Yeah,
it hasn't gone up at all.
Not really, no.
Yeah, okay. No, interesting.
But I guess he loved Charles Hopkins, and he was the guy that started it all in 2017. So he was with Ethereum when Ethereum started, and then he split off, created ADA, and then he wanted to make it more efficient, smart contracts, and all of these cool fancy words. I know in the last year, apparently there's been a lot of issues with their smart contracts, but at the time, it looked like it was all academic-based, research-based as well. At the time, it looked really, really cool. And they were doing a lot of things in Africa, a lot of different projects. So it wasn't just this coin. It's like they were building phone towers in Africa. They were trying to get the internet over there through.
So is that why you got into it?
I got into it because of him, because of how enthusiastic and passionate he was about it, like you are with Bitcoin.
Yeah. So then how did you get into Bitcoin?
You. I guess at the time, he said Bitcoin's technology, because it was the first, was really, really slow.
Yeah.
And something else would overtake it.
Okay. So he felt like because Bitcoin was first, it was actually more of a downside for him. Other technology is going to be better. People are going to jump on the other technology. And so Bitcoin won't be the number one asset.
I guess as you said, transferring Bitcoin to another wallet takes 10, 15 minutes. These ones, it's a split second. That's why Ripple was so good, because the banking industry would use it and people would be able to transfer really fast.
Yeah, by the way, it depends how much as well. And it also depends, just for the transfer things. Like, you can use a Lightning network and you can transfer in like a second or something for Bitcoin too. But definitely it's the slowest of them all. If you're just talking about technology, you weren't talking about all the fundamental principles of it. There are other things that would be quicker for sure.
But as we know, I think as you've said, that's made Bitcoin better is that there's no one controlling it. It was the first. And a lot of it now is it's a placeholder. It's a storage of value like gold.
Yeah.
And so much as it can't be manipulated like we've seen from other companies, I guess that's what makes Bitcoin better. But at the time, I was all aboard the ADA train. Choo-choo.
So good.
And so I still have, I won't say the figure, but a little bit in Cardano.
Okay.
Somewhere in a wallet.
Not a Bitcoin maxi yet, but listening to the podcast, you have. So just to be clear here with the viewers, we've orange pilled my brother in terms of you had no Bitcoin before the podcast, and since the podcast, you now own some Bitcoin.
I do owe some Bitcoin.
Nice, good man, good man. You don't have to tell us how much or percentages or anything, but. We love that. We love that the message is spreading and people are building their wealth in a smart way. So that's good. Well done.
Definitely. I think your podcast definitely presents a lot of really good arguments. And I think your enthusiasm for it's really, I guess, influenced me to look at it and just
still do your own research, as we say every week. Don't just listen to me, but look things up for yourself.
I think all you need to do is look at really smart people and just copy whatever they're doing.
Do you know what? I don't know if you're being a little bit funny there, and like obviously I'm not very smart, but what is interesting is one of the other guys who's been a big influence in my Bitcoin journey, Tyler. We spoke about him a bit. So he says that he has a saying basically where it's like if the top 10% of people that he knows, like the smartest 10% of people that he knows, if they really like something, like if these really smart people that he knows, if they really like something, then he'll invest like 10% of his wealth in it or something. He's like, that's like his little rule. And he said it's served him so well over the years where it's like these smart people that he knows, he's like, if they like, yeah, if they love it, if they're like, hey, listen, this thing's really good, then he does what you were just saying there. Being a little bit facetious, maybe, I'm not sure.
I was being a bit silly. Sorry, it was a joke.
But it's a funny motto that people follow. People actually follow that. They're like, hey, I know this guy, I trust this guy. This guy's doing what... I'm not talking about me, by the way. I was talking about Tyler. But yeah, it's like, hey, I'm going to invest a percentage of my net worth in this thing because it sounds like it's pretty good. And if he's really confident, then I'm pretty confident.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's, you don't just follow the crowd. You don't be a sheep.
Correct.
You do your own research, understand as best you can. Like, I'm never going to understand how to build a computer.
Yeah.
But I'll want to understand the functionality of it all. And if I think it's awesome, and I can see all these massive wealthy people are all funneling a lot of their money into it, then, well, it's like, I guess it is a good bet that it's probably going to go up.
Yeah.
Especially all the news you say every single podcast.
Yeah, no, I love that. I definitely love that. Jono, Bitcoin versus, how do you say it?
Cardano.
Bitcoin versus Cardano. Here we go. So tell us, what do you like about Cardano? You've told us a little bit, I guess, already in terms of, but what else can you see?
For me, it was listening to some of his YouTube videos, Charles Hopkins, when I first got into it.
Yeah.
A lot of it was talking about titling land. It's these functionalities of the technology that could be used in the future. Like, half the world's untitled. Imagine being able to do that using smart contracts on cryptocurrencies. So people can actually title their land that never were able to before because governments at the time weren't good enough. You know, you look at El Salvador that transferred all the money into Bitcoin and now that country's flying when they were almost broke. For me, I think their technology is obviously very fast. They have smart contracts and their network. I guess for me, when I was looking at Bitcoin, and there's things called altcoins.
Yeah.
And altcoins are basically coins that are on that network.
They have other names, but we won't use that on this podcast. But yes.
Crap coins.
Yeah, something like that.
So I guess altcoins, or a lot of those, a lot of them are scams. Some of them actually have functionalities though.
Yeah. Like
I was telling you about the one about building mobile towers and bringing the internet into Africa, things like that. I guess for me, I thought it had a lot of good functionality in that technology. From what Davo was telling me, watching those YouTube videos, and there was sort of like a group of 5 or 6 of us that knew Davo. That shouldn't have said his name, but it's just Davo, so you don't know the last name. That's all right. Okay. So I guess that's what really got me into it.
Yeah. What do you know about it now where you think this is really positive?
I think
speed, obviously, you spoke about.
The speed's really good. The smart contracts.
Yeah.
So being able to trace. One of the things I was told is that if you transfer money, say using Bitcoin, you don't know. There's no record of it being transferred. But with smart contracts, you can say, yeah, it's come from this wallet to that wallet. So let's say something happened with the technology, you can trace it back. If that makes sense. So for me, it was like the smart contracts were a big deal of it. And I guess people maybe adapting that technology in the future so the price of it would go up. I don't know. I'm not an expert on it. And I guess from what I've heard recently in the last year, there's been a few issues with Cardano. And it's starting to... There was issues with the smart contracts. Obviously, a lot of the technology, because it was peer scientific researched, which was one of the big deals of it, is one of the reasons I got into it. But that obviously that was 3 or 4 years ago now.
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
And then obviously once once they had the Bitcoin crash that obviously crashed as well at the time in 2022.
Yeah.
After it all skyrocketed. So
Yeah, interesting. No, thanks, Jono. So I've done a little bit of what I did because obviously, we said a few weeks ago we're going to explore the crypto or digital assets, if you like, that Trump originally said was going to put in a strategic reserve, and then obviously changed his mind. But we wanted to explore them because we've looked at the fundamentals, I should say, and the principles of Bitcoin. But we haven't really explored the other digital assets that might be the big ones that he might have put in a reserve, and he ended up, not doing it, which was great. But these are still in the news. These are still spoken about a lot, and people want to know, should I be investing in these things? So this is what I found. So Charles Hoskinson, like you said, he was the founder of Cardano. He also founded the Input Output Hong Kong, so now known as the Input Output Global. So it's IOHK. So it's the blockchain research and development company. They were the ones that built Cardano. Now, they hold significant sway over protocol updates and parameter changes. So they can actually right now, so just look this up. So they could actually halt the blockchain by altering key parameters. And that's like a level of control that someone has over it that no one has over Bitcoin. And that's what I spoke about with the other, like even Ethereum and Solana and things like that too. It's like there is still this control over it that no one else has over Bitcoin. And another example of that is, so Bitcoin miners obviously compete globally. So there's Bitcoin miners all around the world competing globally to try and mine the limited Bitcoin that is available each day. There's no central coordinator. So it's like everyone can get on, it's like that proof of work we've spoken about a lot, whereas Cardano is that proof of stake where people do have more control than others. So basically, the wealthier entities, they can dominate the staking. The system incentivizes delegation rather than direct participation, which reduces the number of active validators compared to Bitcoin's broader node network, which is then also a bit of a security thing as well. So it's like, not only is Bitcoin decentralized, but it's much more secure because it gives more incentives for more people to be involved because everyone has an equal say, if you like. Everyone has an equal chance. It's not like, this proof of stake where the more you have, the more say you have, if that makes sense. So that's my reservations just looking it up. But definitely appreciate you sharing some insights and some positives into it as well, because it is good to learn. Like even listening to you is like, oh yeah, some of those things, with the land titles and things like that. It's like, oh yeah, wow, true. That is interesting, right? It's very interesting to learn. So we definitely appreciate that. Just to kind of wrap up, running out of time a little bit here, but we had some fascinating tweets of the week. So we've been doing a bit of a segment with us, tweets of the week. Now, Thomas Farah, he is on X. He's really good to follow. So he actually goes through basically the outflows and the inflows of all the big companies and the ETFs. And he put out a tweet this week. He said, if Bitcoin's volatility is too much for you, obviously, Bitcoin's, it's always spoken about. It's very volatile. Some people think it's too volatile. He said, if Bitcoin's volatility is too much for you, just wait to buy until after the US states have set up their Bitcoin reserves and Bitcoin is trading at $400,000 a coin. Bitcoin should be fairly stable at this point. So I thought that was brilliant from him. That was very, very good. Now, this is interesting. A bit of news back home. So bringing it back to Australia. So the BTC Club tweeted the official Australian government statistics. So this was the ABS, from the ABS website, the data from 2020 and to the data of 2024. So this is just stats, like literally facts, statistics from those 2 years. It was really interesting because they went through the expenses. So you talk about cost of living and you talk about why Bitcoin's so important. So this is the expenses just from 2020 until last year, 2024.
So 4 years?
Yeah. So groceries in 2020 on average, so this is just the average median household. So groceries in 2020 on average would cost your average household about $12,500 a year. So 4 years later, it would cost you on average $21,250 a year.
So you're telling me my groceries have doubled in 4 years?
How crazy is that? An extra 10 grand in just 4 years that we're spending on average. Now, this is just facts. So because a lot of people still, I've heard it would be like, oh no, it's cost of living's not too bad. Like obviously people are feeling it. Other people are like cost of living's bad, but you know when you look at these stats, it's like, oh, there's no real argument that you can make that things aren't going a negative way here. So for mortgages, an average of 500,000 mortgage. So for people that have a $500,000 mortgage in Australia, they were paying $4,000 a year in 2020. In 2024, for that same principal amount, they're now paying $31,000. It's quite a jump there, isn't it? So transport on average in 2020 was costing Australians $11,200. In 2024, it's costing Australians $19,000. A bit over $19,000.
Almost doubled again.
Insurance in 2020 was costing $4,000. In 2024, it's costing $6,800. Utilities in 2024, about $3,000 just over. In 2020, about $3,000 for utilities, your power, gas, things like that. And then in 2024, you're paying almost $4,500.
So what's the average jump, Josh?
Yeah, so that's perfect. So $45,224 were the average expenses in 2020 for just your average amount. In 2024, that number is $82,410. That's last year.
So it's almost doubled.
In 4 years.
That's not crazy at all. But isn't inflation data like... Didn't it go up 7%? Didn't they tell us? And then 4 and 5%?
Yeah, I wouldn't listen to any inflation data that they give.
But
do you know what?
I know we're going a bit overtime, but I actually heard a funny story about the inflation figures and how they screw them up.
Yeah, I've heard of this as well.
So apparently, groceries, if they'll look, let's say the price of steak doubled.
Yeah.
They would put steak out of the figures, and then they might put chicken that might have only gone up $2.
Yeah.
And so they supplement things depending on what makes the facts look better, because the government obviously controls the inflation figures, and they don't want to be known as the government that made inflation go up 20-25%. So
Correct.
The real inflation data is always a lot worse, normally double or triple than what they're actually telling us.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and that's completely true. And yeah, it's incredible when you start researching this stuff. So the average income was $102,000. So that was like your average income. So in 2020, 46% of your yearly income. Now this is gross, by the way. So your tax hasn't even been taken out yet. So this is expenses in 2020. We're looking at 46% of your income. Now in 2024, it's 82% on average.
So you're telling me 82% of my expenses are going to just surviving.
Yeah, correct. Of your income. And that hasn't even taken out tax, which is crazy. Now, in that same time, why do we bring this up? Well, it's interesting news in Australia. And like you said, there's, it's crazy some of the statistics and the way that they might try and manipulate the data, but you can't kind of, I guess, fudge these numbers. And the ones here that is also interesting is that, so Bitcoin in that same time, where your cost of living's almost doubled in 4 years, Bitcoin in the same time has enjoyed a 760% gain.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. It's the most of any asset. It's more than any houses. It's more than gold. It's a good little learning curve.
Sure. So that, on average, it's gone up, 180, 190, I'm just quick maths on the top of my head, 180% per year?
Yeah, something like that, from the start of 2020 to 2024. Our last tweet of the week was from Rajat. He is a big financial guy, and this just comes back to our Ethereum. So we've been exploring the other coins, if you like. So in 2017, with one Bitcoin, you would get 6 ETH if you're going to buy that on the
What's ETH?
Ethereum. You get 6 of them for one Bitcoin. Right now, with your one Bitcoin, you'd get 42.
42. Ooh, that's a lot of Bitcoin, buddy.
Well, it's a lot of Ethereum, but it's just going to continually go down compared to Bitcoin. Jono, thanks so much for joining us. There's a couple of things as well, which was so as part of your journey, you've been a little mini celebrity over the years.
Do we need to get into this, Josh?
This is fantastic. So Jono did spend some time, as he said, in his learnings. He spent some time in the Northern Territory. He spent some time in the Pilbara, up at the top of WA. I'm sure you'll have plenty of fun stories for us about those trips as well. But Jono actually... he's been on Channel 9 News selling footy records. He's been on Deal or No Deal. He's been on The Hot Seat with Eddie Maguire. Jono tried to convince Eddie Maguire on Hot Seat that he was a crocodile hunter, and he actually stood up out of his seat in the middle of the questions, and he gave Eddie a bit of a demonstration on how he would wrestle crocodiles. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. That was a very. We're talking about finances. I was 2 questions off $100,000, but I haven't thought about that. I don't think about that very often. Imagine I could almost buy a whole Bitcoin with that.
And now it's funny because we actually, I was going to ask you, I'll give you a 30 seconds. Out of all your little celebrity hikes, if you like, and celebrity experiences, interesting to see who's the most interesting person you've ever met in your life. I'd be interested to find that out. But while you're doing that, this is how Jono, right? So Eddie Maguire would see thousands of people every week, like thousands and thousands. This was a few years later. We went and sat in the Cricket World Cup. Now, me and my mate, a good mate of mine, Butch, I'll call him. Him and I always joke about, when you go to places, you just act confident and you can get in anywhere. And Jono and I certainly live that in every sporting event we go to. We are confident. We ended up sitting, so the Cricket World Cup 2015 at the MCG, we ended up sitting on level 2 next to like the CEO of Australia. It was James Sutherland at the time.
Yeah, it was John Howard.
It was John Howard.
Johnny.
Yeah, John Howard was next to us.
There was a Premier was there.
Yeah, Premier
ex-politicians.
Premier Victoria. There's all these politicians. Literally, we just kind of like confident, got to level 2, just walked around till we found like what we thought we could kind of get in and find some empty seats.
And in the row next to us is the CEO of Cricket Australia, 2016 World Cup.
Yeah.
Wasn't it funny? Remember the guys behind us that got kicked out?
Yeah, some other guys got kicked out because they weren't meant to be there. And
we were
John
standing there. We had our staff lanyards, but just act confident, buddy. Confident.
Just act confident. Yeah, we had these. Anyway, we won't go into those. But yes, confident. We ended up getting to sit in this epic spot and watch the whole World Cup, and Australia won. It was 2015, and it was incredible. Where then to the row next to us is Eddie Maguire. Right, so all these celebrities, and we get up and we're celebrating, and Australia win, and it's awesome. We beat New Zealand at the MCG. Stark bowls McCullum, one of the loudest roars I think I've ever heard. It was just, it was awesome. It was incredible. We get up, we walk over, and Eddie stops Jono. So we're walking up the stairs celebrating, and Eddie stops Jono. This is a couple of years ago. Eddie goes, "How do I know you?" He goes, "I know you from somewhere." And then Jono, of course.
I was on hot seat.
He was on hot seat, and he goes, "That's right." And the Crocodile Hunter. So definitely memorable. Who is the most interesting person you've met?
Not yourself. Is that? Can I say
no, definitely not me.
I haven't met any A-grade Hollywood celebrities. I lived on Phillip Island for 4 months during my gap 2 years, and Chris and Liam Hemsworth used to live there. I do have a story about that. So I guess my near touch with Hollywood fame. One time I was actually walking Ruby, and we're walking around.
That was the family dog?
Yeah, we're walking on the beach, and I used to go exploring together. So it would have been like 21, and Ruby started going through these bushes, and so I'm like, I just followed her because I just love going off track and just walking for hours and hours. Anyway, we go off track. And then all of a sudden we get to this clearing, and it opens up, and all of a sudden there's these 2 massive mansions, and there was swimming pool, tennis courts, everything. And we're on the outside of the property. And I'm just like, what the hell? This is quite secluded. And as we walk around, I was just like, this is like I don't want to get in trouble here for trespassing. So I walk on the outside of the property, and I get out. And later was I to know, I'm pretty sure it was the Hemsworth property.
Wow.
Now I've got no way of verifying that. But who owns 2 big houses like that on that island if you're not an A-grade Hollywood celebrity?
Yeah,
so
secluded, hidden in the bushes.
It could have been. So I still debate maybe I was on their property, but...
So you've been on the property of Chris and Liam Hemsworth?
Potentially. I can't guarantee that, obviously for legal reasons.
Yes.
But...
Yeah.
But I can't. But I do know people I used to work with at Woolies used to know them really well and were in their year level when I was living there. So, but obviously through working, being on a few of the game shows, you see all the sort of Australian celebrities. But yeah, that was probably the touch of Hollywood glam.
There you go. The most interesting people that you've almost met. Met. Johnny, thanks so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear your journey, to reminisce, to talk about Bitcoin and some of the altcoins. The Bitcoin news Yeah, really appreciate you coming on, mate. You've done an incredible job. Well done to your. You spoke very highly of your partner and the way that you've come through over the years from a conservative to a fast and loose, and then back to a bit of a family man with a couple of kids and a great fiance. So we're absolutely overjoyed, mate, to have our official brother on the Bitcoin Brothers. Will you come back?
Thanks for having me, buddy. Well, I guess it is called Bitcoin Brothers, so
We'll have to get you back every few weeks to run through the segments with us and the news and.
yeah, I just think, one question I wanted to ask you, actually, is what's your one piece of advice? If someone had, let's say, $10,000, they wanted to start investing, how much do you reckon they should put in Bitcoin?
Well, I can't legally. I'm not sure I'm allowed to give official financial advice. So
Let's just say I gave you,
hypothetically, in my opinion,
hypothetically,
which is not financial advice, if I had 10 grand, what do I do with it? I'd just put it straight into Bitcoin. If that's all I had, I'd put it on a cold wallet and I'd save it, and then I'd just keep trying to add more. And if I felt like gambling a little bit, then I'd probably put like 50 or 60% into Bitcoin, and I'd put the other 40 or 50% into MicroStrategy shares, because they might actually go up more than Bitcoin goes up. But they also might not. So
don't they own most of
I
Bitcoin?
mean, all they do is own Bitcoin, yeah. So,
Yeah.
But there's a good chance of that. But that's very hypothetical and not financial advice.
Well,
And we don't give any of that on here, but we just talk about facts and have fun. And Bitcoin is fun, so we enjoy it.
I have a good new segment idea for next week.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's called the Choo Choo. That could be the opening monologue of it. Go choo choo.
Get Ricky Nixon.
I'm for the Bitcoin train. And then maybe you could talk about some guys that have, like some big guys in the world that have invested more in Bitcoin.
Thank you. Choo choo. All right, we'll take that on board. Jono, thanks so much for coming. Go Saints. For those
Go
of you who
Saints.
don't know, the Saints, hopefully when you're listening to this podcast, the Saints have upset Geelong at Marvel Stadium with all our kids. And
I heard Bailey Smith's out, so
yeah, that's exciting.
So in the words of Jim Carrey, you're telling me there is a chance?
Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Please like, subscribe on YouTube. We're there now. We're on X. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple. We appreciate all the support. We love the messages. Keep them coming through. And we'll see you next time, hopefully.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Jono. See you guys.
See you later.